This is just to walk through some of the resources which are available to members of the Guild on our website. Some are available to everyone. A lot of them are members only, and of course, as Guild members, you also get access to the expert help of our staff. I'm not a member of the staff. I'm just an enthusiastic volunteer, and I chair the TV committee. So it's just and I'm not an expert in all these things, but I know sort of where our agreements can be found, and where we can find some of these very interesting documents and guides which we have. John, this is John Sailing.
Thank you very much. I'll just introduce myself. I'm John Sailing. I'm one of the caseworkers at the Guild. So I'm often one of the people that people come to when they say, I've got a TV agreement or I've got an issue to do with my work in television. Please help me out. I need a bit of advice on this. So if you do need any advice, you can email us. Our email address is casework@writersguild.org.uk, and we're always happy to help out our members with anything we possibly can. So I think let's go into it. So Emma, can you tell us a little bit about working for free within television? How likely is it that a writer's going to be asked to work for free? Have you ever been asked to work for free? And what can writers do to assess how legitimate any requests to work for free are?
I think everybody does a certain amount of work for free within television, but I think a lot of the free work which sort of people expect to undertake and do undertake is on your own original work, where you own the copyright and you're doing it your way. I think the Guild's view is that as soon as you enter into a discussion with a production company where they are asking for rewrites, asking for changes, or asking for the right to pitch your work to somebody else, at that point, so as early as possible, really, you should really ask to be paid. And we think it's sort of it helps from both sides. So we have a couple of documents which are useful for that. So if you've logged in as a member, one of the useful things which is under resources is a piece of work which was a campaign we did a few years ago, but it's still a very useful document called "Free is Not an Option." That was sort of created by the brainchild of my predecessor as TV chair, Bill. And so "Free is Not an Option" is under it's on the it's on the Guild site under resources, and then it's under WGGB guidelines. So yes, so if you go to resources, we have "Free is Not an Option," and also there are a couple of different articles about. We have some very simple flow charts about should I work for free. Yes, there they are. There are the flow charts. So we have one which is in general for TV. Should I work for free? We've got them for all the various craft areas, but we have a TV one, and then a specific one about TV shadow schemes, because the Guild has done quite a lot of campaigning over the years with TV companies, encouraging them to pay writers on their trials and shadow schemes. So you'll see that on "Should I Work for Free?" going, how is the picture or treatment delivered in writing? How long is the written document? 1 or 2 pages. For an experienced writer, this would take 2 weeks and is usually done without a fee. Any more work than this will be paid for. I think quite often writers want to do, say, a couple of pages for themselves to sort of explore the idea, and so they've got something to show to a company. But I think, as we're saying, as soon as companies, production companies, start asking for more work than that, you would expect to be paid. So yeah, so under resources, we've got guide, should I work for free? Should I do shadow scheme? Should I work for free? And also free is not an option. And we also have there's guidelines for the template from a right to pitch, isn't there, John? And this under that same section, yes.
Yeah.
So yes.
It's there somewhere. Yeah, it's within the resources section. I'm sure we'll talk a bit more about that in just a second. So, yes. So thank you for that, Emma. That's all about kind of when and why and how to kind of do the working for free. But you know, in the main about when you should be getting paid. So Emma, a lot of writers will have a situation where a producer or a director will come to them and say, well, you've got this piece of work, but you don't have any connections within the industry. I've got a few connections. I can tout this piece of work around. I can pitch it to a couple of production companies. Should a writer allow them to do that for free? I mean, they're doing them a favour, aren't they?
I think that's where the right to pitch document comes in, and I think you just need to be very clear and get things signed. I think, as we discussed before, quite often the casework which John has to deal with, the problem is that sort of something took a wrong turn quite a few stages ago. And so we always sort of say it's never really too early to get anything in writing. I think so the right to pitch template contract would suggest getting things agreed in writing before anybody attaches themselves to your project in any way, because I think we have had experience of writers, if you've created something and somebody's showing it around the industry, they might feel that they own it in some way, or they're co-creator in some way, and so that's why it's very important to get agreements very clear from the beginning, so we know what people are agreeing to. And if rather than people acting on assumptions which may turn out to be false. And I think if a director is pitching it around the industry with the view that they would be the director, do you want that? Do you want that director to be attached to the project? I think sort of think very carefully about what you want, and that's where sort of things like the right to pitch template contract comes in useful.
And the right to pitch template contract has a suggested fee of around £500 for a year's right to pitch, so that as the writer, you're not locking anything in for too long without at least getting some form of remuneration for that. Is that do you think that's a good idea? Do you think that's about fair?
I think it is, and I think with free is not an option. It's interesting because with some of these guidelines that we've created, they're primarily from the Guild. Other ones were created by other organisations, and the Guild has consulted on them. But even the ones which are sort of created within the Guild, such as free is not an option, I was part of a consultation process, and we worked with producers. And interestingly, the more reputable producers were all in favour of writers being paid. And admittedly, £500 is not that much in the grand scheme of things from a production company, but they're in favour of writers being paid so that a company has the option, because then everyone knows where they are. I think if sometimes things can be very, very vague, and if it's a couple of companies have seen it and no one quite knows who's got it, I think it's actually in a production company's interests to pay, so that they have the right to take this to broadcasters and streamers or whatever. I think
I think it's worth pointing out here that there's a slight difference, although it's again, I think when you're dealing with this area and these sorts of agreements, things can get very, very confusing very, very easily. And there is a difference between right to pitch agreements and option agreements.
Yes.
And I think it's worth maybe just teasing that out for those people listening now, to say that a right to pitch agreement is just purely giving someone the ability to pitch it to broadcasters or producers, whereas with an option agreement, that's you potentially giving a producer or a broadcaster the ability to acquire your intellectual property the rights to that at some point in the future. So
Yes.
and for an option agreement, we normally recommend a fee of around £1,000 for a year. So
yes,
but do always get these agreements checked with us first, because they are quite complicated, and all too often I've dealt with members who have inadvertently given away all their rights for as little as £1.
as I was saying, is these things are, you know, complicated, and sort of, you know, I obviously I obviously have an agent, and you know, and quite often, you know, sometimes we say, oh, your agent should have dealt with that. But I think, you know, even if you do have an agent, and you know, with the complicated world of options and agreements and things, I think, you know, the fact that if you are a guild member, you can talk to John, and he can, and you know, and he can pass things on to our specialist lawyers if need be. I think, you know, if you have any concerns, even if you've got an agent, it can be worth checking with the guild, because yeah, things I mean, as we say, try and get things down in writing as soon as possible, but also try and get the right things down in writing. I think, I mean, you know, mostly a reputable agent will be well aware of what should go into contracts and what should go into every agreement. But I think there has been we've not seen too much of it here, but in America, of course, as many of you will know, there's been a huge problem with packaging deals, which have been that agents have not always been working in all their clients' best interest, because they're representing more than one side of the they might be representing a producer and a writer and an actor, and indeed in America some agents have been acting as production companies, which of course there was a big sort of move against that with the Writers Guild of America. We're not seeing much of it here, but we have seen just a tiny bit. So I think it's just you know, it's just always not, I mean, it's I'd like to say it's hopefully quite unlikely, but you know, obviously your agent should be acting in your interest and your interest only. And if your agent is ever arguing the case of the other party, then you potentially got an issue and should probably speak to the guild.
No, absolutely. Yeah, I think it's always best looking for those conflicts of interests and just trying to make sure you're aware of them. So that's great. Thank you, Emma. So let's talk a little bit more about money. We've kind of touched on some stuff there, but this is particularly for new writers. But can you just explain a little bit about the structure of TV commission payments? We do have, I know, a number of different television agreements on our website, and more than one rate card. So where should people start? Where should they go first of all to have a look?
Well, so start by going to the rates and agreements section on the website. So so yes, here we are. So it's sort of quite easy to find. There we go. That's the tab on the website there. And depending on who you're working for, it's quite likely that you would be working for an independent production company, in which case you would most likely go to the packed rate card, which is agreed with a collection of indie producers. BBC and ITV speak for themselves. If you're working directly for BBC or ITV, they now both work. Of course, as always, things have got a little bit more complicated than they used to be, because BBC and ITV now both run, there's ITV studios and BBC studios, which can make things for each other or anybody else. But if you're working directly with the BBC, you would look at the BBC rate card, ITV. If you're working for most indies, you would go to packed. And S4C is obviously, if you're working for S4C, and the TAC is, I think it's a Welsh, I think it's mostly for Welsh speaking work, isn't it, John?
Yeah, I believe so, yeah.
Correct?
Yeah,
so the fourth rate card on the list, TAC S4C, is for Welsh speaking work. And so the rate cards are the ones which are kept most up to date, and that they are very, very, the briefest description of how you get paid. They are the most recent negotiations are reflected there. And then the longer agreements, if you go to those, they will sort of have more details, and that they might not be as regularly updated. but they will cover the but that they will cover the sort of in more detail the terms of how you get paid and various terms and conditions and things. And the rate cards are just a really quick sort of at a glance what you'll be paid.
Yeah, and remember, I mean, if in doubt, check with us. We're always more than happy to help guide and advise on what it is you should be getting paid.
Yes,
within those agreements.
And most agreements have the payments can be staggered. So and it's based on a sort of 100% of the fee, obviously. I think the BBC, for example, and of course, to add to the complications, you know, you may be commissioned to go straight for script, which would usually mean you get paid 50% on signature, and then 25% on delivery and another 25% on acceptance. But you can also be commissioned to go to outline first at 10% or scene by scene at 25%. And then one of the most important things is that all our agreements include a provision which is an advance against future earnings, which is payable on beginning of principal photography. And that's usually that you sometimes hear it called a PPP, which is principal photography payment. But it's usually these days we hear it as SUA, subsequent use advance. So that is payable on most work, not some continuing dramas, which is soaps, but you know, largely in work you should also have an SUA, but that will be detailed in the agreements.
Brilliant. Thank you for that, Emma. And what else might members or writers find within the agreements? What other kind of things should they potentially look out for?
There's obviously the thing about how you'll be credited, copyright, how you will be paid for repeats or extracts of your work. So there are various sort of things such as the formats. So if you've created an original format, then you will be entitled to various rights, and you know, so for instance, if there should be episodes of the show written which you didn't actually write, you should get some money for those.
So just for those who may not know, can you just explain what formats are exactly? Because some people may not be aware of the term.
I mean, like everything, this business, this can be this can sometimes be a disputed area, but basically the format is the person that sort of owns the show essentially, and I think we've been doing some work which we'll probably come on to later to try to sort of assert the rights of actual writers to have a piece of show ownership, because I think like a lot of things, it can mean various things, but the owner of the format is, for instance, you know, if you wrote an episode of EastEnders, you wouldn't own the format to that, but the people who originally created EastEnders would. So it's sort of who's the original creator, and it's it would be in the contract as sort of like fees that the creator gets whenever the work is used.
Brilliant. That's great. Thank you for that, Emma. And one of the things we get, and we've touched on this now, and we'll come on to it, is one of the things we get asked about a lot is what credit someone should get, especially if a project was your idea from the start. We've talked a little bit about format agreements there and kind of where that comes in. But we have some other guidance around created credits or created by credits. Can you just go through a little bit about that for us, please, and why you think that's needed, and why you think that's so important?
Yes, we did a session on this, and we've created a guide. So under resources, we've got a guide which the Guild created to this credit, and this is and it can be, it's because what there isn't really, we've just sort of discovered there isn't. There aren't in many ways a true industry standard for credit, and things like created by, developed for television by, created for television by. These are all things that you might see on screen, and we have found that there's quite a lot of disparity in sort of how writers get credited and who counts as the creator of a show. And so we did some work, and so we've got quite a detailed document talking about the credit, because of course, like everything, it's not as simple as you may think. I think because there is a lot of value and money in format rights, I think what we were particularly trying to protect our members from was a kind of growing experience that sort of writers would go and sort of pitch their ideas to companies, and companies would be less interested in hearing a new pitch, because they'd say, we've got this idea, and do you want to work on this idea? And that sometimes writers would find that just from perhaps they're just being given a sentence or two by or just a brief sort of you know, just a sort of brief pitch document from a company, and a writer would sort of be working very happily to turn this into a show, and then sometimes they would be sort of quite upset and disappointed at the end of the process to realize that they're just viewed as a writer for hire on that show, not the creator. And it was inspired by the Israeli and Spanish guilds in particular, because of course we have to work within British copyright. German and Spanish law is a lot more in favor of the person who actually realizes the vision. But we believe that whoever writes the pilot episode should be entitled to a share of format rights, and be at least to be a co-creator. But yes, it is again quite complicated. But I think but what constitutes creating a show and who is the creator, it can be quite a fraught area. And I think, you know, there are examples of people, non-writers, or trying to sort of insert themselves as a creator of a show when actually they didn't create it. So that's what this was all about. And we did a whole event, a launch event last year, discussing it, and that should be under. So I know we've got in the members area, we've got a lot of videos of the various events we've done online for people to access. Is it under that, John?
It is, yeah. It'll be on that section of the members area, where we've got, yeah, as you say, all of the videos to all of these events that we've got. We've now got quite a big bank actually of videos that we've got that go through all sorts of manner of advice and guidance, interviews with prominent writers, and all manner of stuff. So it is definitely worth having a look for that.
Yes.
Okay. Well, thank you for that, Emma. So as we've kind of been through, we all have the minimum terms agreements, and we have the rates cards, and we've got guidance, and we've got the videos, and we've got myself, Nadine, and other members of staff, and as well as volunteers and the chair like Emma. But we're really dependent on our members to keep us informed of what's going on. They are our ears and eyes on the ground. And in order for us to be able to keep putting out best practice, putting out good guidance, I'm making sure the agreements that we got are actually reflecting the difficulties that our members face. We do ask for some feedback from members and non-members. And there are various different mechanisms we have to monitor what's going on. So firstly, we have the contract vetting that, as we've mentioned, myself and Nadine deal with. So if you're a member, and it is for members only that we offer the contract vetting, but if you're a member, you can send us your contract. You can send it to casework@writersguild.org.uk, or there is a section on the members area in the website where you can upload the contract and send it through. As long as your contract is for your writing, you know, if you're producing or directing it and it's got those elements in there, unfortunately we can't comment on those. We can only comment on the writing section, and as long as it's based on UK law, as long as it's not an agreement under American law, we get a few of those occasionally, or any other form of jurisdiction is for anywhere else other than UK. Unfortunately, we can't look at those. But if it's a UK law writers agreement, you can get that vetted for free as part of your guild membership. So, and as we say, get things checked. It's, you know, better to be safe than sorry. And, you know, you'd be surprised the number of times that myself and the Dean have looked at something a bit too late, unfortunately. So it's always a good idea just to make sure you've got it right. We have a few other ways in which you can report to us what's going on about your experiences across the industry. One of those, so we actually have a section on our website called Have Your Say, where all of these things are. So the first is Report It, which is available to anyone. It's a completely, can be a completely anonymous portal for you to tell us about your experiences, good or bad, across the industry. So they're there to tell us about maybe any instances of bullying or harassment, any form of abuse where you're not quite sure of or something you just want to let us know, perhaps. So we're building up a bank there of knowledge and of data, so that if there are issues from particular producer, for example, we know about those and we can take action if you want us to, and that's quite an important point. We won't do anything unless you want us to. Next, we have Telling Our Stories. So this is part of a piece of work we're doing with InCarts around the experiences that ethnically diverse writers are facing. And we want to hear from ethnically diverse writers about their experiences within the industry, again, good and bad, and that's going to help form some work that we do looking at where there may be barriers to those writers and what we can do to reduce those. So please, we've sent that out in some of our mailings, and please do fill out that survey if you, when you can. It shouldn't take too long, but it's really, really valuable that we do hear about those experiences so that we can base our work on some really solid information. And finally, we have our new TV monitoring survey. And Emma, could you tell us a little bit about this, please?
Yeah, so this is a new thing, and it's the brainchild of Jude, who's on our TV committee. I think it's a really good initiative, because most people, as we've seen, we've got the rate card and the agreements, and they set the minimum rates, but most writers, particularly if been working for a while, aren't on minimum rates, and some writers are indeed on considerably more, and it's quite hard to find out what you should be paid at a certain level. I think things vary wildly. So and of course, you know, somebody negotiating against you is always going to say, this is a huge payment, you know, you're really lucky to get this. And so we're setting up an anonymous fees database to try and find out more about what our members are actually getting paid, and we're specific about across various genres, and about different slots, different and the experience of the writer, and things like that. So we're trying to the idea being that, you know, if there are sort of discrepancies, you know, for example, say men being paid more than women, or people from various ethnic groups getting paid more or less, and anything like that, we would be able to find out. So it's kind of it's about equality, but it's also about sort of just you know, writers sort of sharing the information, so we can find out, you know, what really is out there, what people are being paid, and it's completely anonymous, but so that, yeah, just because obviously a company is always going to claim this is the maximum they can afford to pay, and the maximum they pay anybody, but you know, that might not necessarily be right. So yeah, so it's a new thing we're starting up, and yeah, I could really urge people to and it is specifically for television. So yeah, so obviously this whole session is about television. So yes, it's just as a way to try and find out what TV writers are being paid and what's going on out there.
There you go. And I've just put the link to the Have Your Say section into the chat box, so you can access Telling Our Stories, the TV pay monitoring, and Report It, which are all available there. So I think we're on to questions. So if you've got a question that you'd like to ask Emma or myself about TV, about our agreements, please do put it in the chat box now, and we'll ask it.
Yes. I see somebody has asked, a production wants to film a pilot and has asked me to work on a points system. presumably that's points of who would own the eventual property. What do you think about that, John? I mean, it sounds as if they want to film something with sort of promises of money later rather than being paid now.
So this goes back to, I think, what you were saying before, Emma, about whatever you do, get something in writing first of all, you know, and then get it checked by us, because we can then check what those details say, what it actually means, and what it, you know, if it's actually a good deal for you or not.
Yes.
I'm slightly skeptical normally, but
Yes.
if you just let us know, give it to us, we can have a look and provide you full and proper advice in that way. And I think that's always the best thing for you to
I mean, I must admit I'm slightly skeptical too, but I think it would depend on the situation. And obviously I don't want to sort of, you know, we don't want to go into individual cases here, but, you know, I think for example, you know, if Baby Cow or somebody like that said that to you, then we would be just sort of like, absolutely not. They should be paying you regularly. But I think if it is perhaps a very new tiny startup company, and it's almost like a group of mates, colleagues working together to get this thing made, I think sort of there could be, you know, it might be worth doing. But I think yes, again, I think yes, talk to John or one of his fellow caseworkers at the Guild about that.
So next we have Emma,
yes.
one from Hannah. Should you expect to receive an agreement if you are accepted onto a new writers program? And is there ever any room for negotiations if you're working towards a pilot and they are intending to pay you a fee? And they intend you to pay you a fee.
Well, I mean, our attitude to that would be that, and another interesting document that we have, and which on our resources section is there's competitional cut price commission is an interesting one. I'm just looking, checking where we've got it.
I think you've gone straight for the answer there, Emma. I think, you know, again, like most of these things, it's get it checked. I think if you're accepted onto a writers program and you're going to be creating work that they may want to use, there's going to need to be some form of agreement around what that is. I mean, if you're accepted onto a writers group for the purpose of learning about the industry and for learning about the writing process, but they're not actually going to do anything with the material, that's something very different as to where you're accepted onto a program or a writers room where they are going to be looking to get all that work made.
I mean, our standard answer would be if they want you to write a script as part of this process, and certainly if they want to own that anyway, they should be paying you Writers Guild minimum fees. That would be our normal answer. We have occasionally sort of compromised in the past where it's been that this, but if they can't, you know, if they can't produce a minimum fee, then they should be giving you something else very important in return, such as important experience. So if it's if there's an element of training for you know for new writers that the training will be genuinely useful, or if there's or if it's sort of, you know, that can be taken into consideration. But, you know, but generally if somebody's asking you to and I think also if somebody's asking you to write a script and they're paying you some smaller fee and it's not to do with not up to our minimum, I think, you know, as you say, in negotiation, like do they own it? So, you know, if they're paying you a derisory amount, I think yes, there should be room for negotiation. There should also be room for you to say, well, I retain my copyright then, which a lot of reputable schemes will do. Yeah.
So the next one is about if you're an as yet if you're a writer without a broadcast credit as of yet, how can you avoid the pressure from producers? How can you avoid the pressure to accept £1 option agreements? How do you say no?
There is actually a guide to that at the end of Free is Not an Option, which is under resources. There's actually a sort of suggested conversation of how to avoid that. I mean, I think it's in everybody's interests really, because like a £1 option, how serious are they? How much will they really try and push this? Whereas, you know, if they've had to pay you, you know, £500 or £1,000 as we suggest, it shows they're serious. So I think you know, but I think by suggesting a £1 option, they're not really committing to you or your work. So I think it's valid to say, are you sure about this? Because yes, for £1, why should you give them an option? Really, it's sort of like broadcast credits or not, they're not doing you a favor. If they think they're doing you a favor, you can politely tell them you don't need their favor. You know, if they are they interested in this property or not, really?
Yeah, I'd echo that as well. I think you could also say, if you want to, I've spoken to the Writers Guild, they've advised me not to accept a £1 option. You know, and just to say we have it for film, but we have a template option agreement that's on our website. We're going to be looking to do one for TV later this year, so keep an eye out for that. But option agreements, definitely don't accept them for £1. As Emma says, they're not doing you a favour. They're trying to get something for nothing. It's not worth it.
I mean, you know, if they've seen enough of your broadcast credits or not, if they've seen enough of your work, if they've seen something in your work that they're interested enough to go through the work of genuinely trying to sell it, then you know, they should understand that they need to pay you a bit more. But as John, sorry, I'm just talking about the background behind it. But as John says, it's absolutely say the Guild agreement says this.
Yeah. Okay, just having a look at the other questions here. Do you see a lot of an American and British co-productions, and if so, how do those agreements and writers' fees differ and work compared to just BBC or ITV productions?
I mean, that's probably more of a question for John. I think a lot of sorry.
That's all right. I've asked the question that I need to answer, haven't I? So yeah, I think we do and we don't, to be honest. There's the contracts we get are often with the production, you know, between the writer and the production company. You don't always necessarily, as long as they're based on the UK on UK law, we will advise on them as we would anything. When you're getting British and American co-productions, you often need to make sure you check the jurisdiction of the contract, because they may then try to shift you onto American terms, which we're not able to advise you on. We would need to pass you over to the WGA to advise on. But if they're based on our agreements and our terms, then we'd advise you accordingly. Really, that I think is what we do then.
There was a question earlier about animation, and I think there is there is a sort of, you know, a slight sort of problem in the UK that I think particularly children's animation doesn't quite come under the same agreements. We've sort of fought it. We've tried to bring it up to the same standards. The main sort of difference is that it doesn't tend to attract any repeat fees. There's no sort of logical reason for this apart from just historical precedent, and historical precedent can have a great force because people just don't want to suddenly start paying a lot more than they've been used to pay. So, but we do have under our resources, we do have a guidelines to animation writings. So you can look at that.
Brilliant. We've got someone else. An agent wants to take their commission from script editing. Should they be allowed to do so?
I know. That sounds like a classic conflict of interest.
Yeah, well, I think it depends on the agreement you've got with your agent and whether or not that includes script editing. I think that's one I'd need to have a look at.
Yeah, it's not a usual clause, is what I would say. Normally, I mean, obviously script editing, I suppose, is, you know, it's much more thorough than the usual sort of notes and suggestions you'd get from your agent, but it's normally the sort of notes and suggestions and ideas that you would get from your agent would be something they would do as part of their general 10% deal.
Okay, so many production companies have a section on their website reading, "We do not accept unsolicited scripts, but do from known agents." And agents want to see you have a professional credit. How do you solve this chicken and egg scenario in TV and film?
Yeah, I mean, that's obviously that's one of the classic difficult things about breaking into the industry. I mean, I think I would say, even though most companies say they won't accept unsolicited scripts, some actually might, if you sort of wrote a sort of significantly persuasive email, and you know, for instance, there are things you could do such as entering certain competitions. But I think also, with not all agents want you to have a professional credit. I think a lot of agents will take somebody on potential. I think it's tough. I mean, we're not going to lie. We know it's difficult. We know it's a chicken and egg situation, and you know, many agents will say their books are closed because as soon as an agent says their books aren't closed, they're just absolutely overwhelmed. But I think probably the answer is to look around for agents that are reading, because there are agents who do well, most agents actually, you know, are looking for sort of new clients that they can sort of break in. So I think sort of, yes, continue with the agent. And I think, you know, there are competitions, there are things like scratch nights of short plays, which you can tell agents about. So there are sort of ways to get some experience.
Yeah, and writers' rooms as well, you know, can sometimes be a good route in. So, I mean, you know, as I normally give the advice of, don't just fire off full scripts unsolicited. You know, maybe send a treatment or only a few pages, and keep a record of everything that is sent as well. So that's the advice there. Streaming agreements, or agreements that cover streaming rights. Emma, would you like to talk about that at all? What, you know, SVODs, and what do we have around that?
At the moment, we don't have agreements with SVODs. So I think we've been taught that we've been in discussions with Netflix, and I think we could sort of, you know, I think obviously if you're in discussion with an SVOD, you could still sort of, you know, use our minimum rates as a sort of a starting point that you should have to be paid. But at the moment, we don't have formal agreements with SVODs. I think the sticking point has been to do with assignment of rights. I think they tend to want more permanent rights over the material, with sort of less potential for royalties in future than most broadcasters have. So that's something which is sort of under negotiation at the moment, because we're aware it's a big thing.
Yeah, and again, you can send those contracts still to us to have a look at, and we can advise you, even though we may not have the formal agreements in place as of yet. Although I hope we will do soon. Next, we've got a question about you know, reciprocal agreement between the WGGB and the WGA. Emma, are you able to answer that one? Would you like me to?
I think I would look to you, John. Sorry, I don't have any knowledge with the WGA.
So the WGGB and the WGA are both part of the IAWG. How many W's are in that? It's the International Association of Writers Guilds, and we do have reciprocal arrangements with them, and to do with all sorts of things. We do liaise regularly with them and discuss with them issues that they're having, issues that we're having. So yeah, we are always in close contact with them. Anyone else got any questions? Anything I might have missed?
Oh yes, somebody's. Oh, okay. Yeah, sorry. I've just realised it is a private message. I shall reply to the member directly. Sorry.
Just while we're waiting for that, then, what I'm going to do very, very quickly is just say we've spoken a lot about our rates and agreements, and said quite regularly, you know, if you've got a question, come to the guild, we'll answer it for you. We'll always give the advice as best we can.
Here's a good one. Delivery times on continuing drama, are there specific guidelines? Yes, there are. There again, under WGGB. Oh, in fact, we've got other on the resources page. We've got the BBC best practice guidelines for continuing drama series, which actually, you know, I think we had input in, but is actually created by the BBC, and they talk about, and that talks about delivery times. So yes, there's that. And I think also in our contracts, I think because it is something which comes up a lot, and I think sort of in some of the continuing dramas, we do in in the sort of contracts, we do actually have agreements about that. So if you look at if you look at our ITV and pact agreements, there should be information on that too.
Brilliant. Just checking something. Okay, so have we got anything? So yeah, as I was saying, a number of our things are available to members and only to members. If you're not a member, I do highly recommend that you look to join the guilds, so you can make use of all the specialist advice and guidance that we are able to offer. I have put a link in the chat now to our join link. There are two main bands of membership. There's candidate membership for new and aspiring writers who don't yet have their professional credits or haven't earned at least £5,000 from their writing in a year. Candidate membership is £108, or you can spread that up over 12 months by a direct debit, which I think my maths is correct, is something like £9 a month. So well worth looking at doing. Full membership is for those members who are professional writers and have their credits and have earned at least £5,000 within a year. And for those members, it's £198 for the year. And after their first year, it's then done on a sliding scale based on your income for writing. Like I said, if you're not a member yet, do please join. We do give a lot of time and effort to our members to help give them the advice that they need. But also, if you're not a member of the guild, it means that you're not part of the organisation that is then negotiating for the better terms and conditions across the industry. It's not just in TV, it's also in film, in theatre, in radio, in books, video games, you name it. If you write, we cover it, apart from anything journalistic. So do obviously look to join if you aren't a member as of yet.